There is a kind of noise that does not come from the world, but from within us. It is not the sound of traffic, or the voices of others, or the endless movement of the world that truly exhausts you. It is something quieter, more persistent, something that stays with you even when everything around you finally grows still. You live in a time where your attention is constantly pulled in every direction. There is always something to respond to, something to consume, something to finish. And yet, no matter how much you do, there is this lingering feeling that you are never quite done, never quite at rest. You move from one task to another, from one thought to the next, carrying a kind of invisible weight. You are tired, but when you stop, the tiredness does not leave you. You rest, but it does not restore you. You are surrounded by people, by voices, by connection, and still there is a quiet sense of distance you cannot explain. You know more than ever before. You are informed, updated, aware, and yet somewhere within all of that you feel lost. And so you try, in your own way, to escape it. You look for silence, for space, for a moment where everything might finally slow down. But even when you find that moment, even when the world grows quiet, something within you continues. The thoughts keep moving. The tension remains. The noise, it seems, has followed you. You have tried to step away from it, but it does not leave. Not because you have failed, but because it was never only outside of you to begin with. And this is where the question begins to shift. What if the problem is not the noise around you, but the way you are listening to it? The world will convince you that the noise you feel is coming from outside, that it is the traffic, the deadlines, the endless stream of voices demanding your attention. But this is only partly true, and perhaps not even the most important part. There have always been crowded streets, restless societies, and seasons of uncertainty. Yet not every person living in the same world experiences the same level of inner chaos. This is because the loudest noise is not what reaches your ears, but what is constantly being repeated in your mind. You wake up, and before the day has even begun, your thoughts are already racing. What needs to be done, what might go wrong, how you compare to others, whether you are enough. Even in moments that should be quiet, something inside you continues to speak, to analyze, to judge. It is this inner commentary that turns a simple moment into a burden. The world presents a situation, but your mind multiplies it into something heavier, something more urgent, something harder to escape. You are not simply hearing life. You are interpreting it, resisting it, reshaping it into something that fits your fears and expectations. When something does not go as planned, it is not just the event that disturbs you, but the story you attach to it. When someone succeeds, it is not just their success you notice, but the silent comparison that follows. When there is uncertainty, your mind does not rest in it. It tries to control it, predict it, and often exaggerate it. This is why you can sit in a quiet room and still feel overwhelmed. The external noise may be gone, but the internal noise continues, uninterrupted. It does not need a crowd to exist. It feeds on your habits of thinking, on your attachment to how things should be rather than how they are. You carry this noise with you everywhere, and so even when you try to escape the world, you find that you have brought the loudest part of it along with you. What you often call stress is not only the pressure of life, but your resistance to it. It is the gap between reality and your expectations, between what is happening and what you believe should be happening. The mind tries to close this gap by force, by overthinking, by worrying, by replaying and rehearsing. But in doing so, it only creates more noise. To begin finding peace, you must first see this clearly, not as an idea, but as something happening within you right now. Notice how quickly your mind reacts, how it clings to certain thoughts, how it refuses to let moments simply be. The realization is subtle but powerful. The noise is not just around you. It is being generated within you, moment by moment. And this changes everything, because what is within you can be understood. And what is understood can, slowly and gently, begin to quiet. There is within you a version of yourself that is constantly speaking, constantly striving, constantly asking to be seen. It is not your deepest self, but it often feels like the only one you know. This is the self that measures its worth by how it appears to others, by how much it achieves, by whether it is approved or ignored. It is restless because it is built on something unstable. It depends on things that change, opinions, outcomes, attention, and so it must keep moving, keep proving, keep performing. You may not notice it at first, because it sounds like your own voice. It tells you to do more, to be better, to stay relevant, to avoid failure at all costs. It whispers that if you stop, even for a moment, you might fall behind or disappear. And so you keep going, not always because you want to, but because something in you is afraid of what will happen if you don't. This fear is subtle, but it shapes much of your life. It turns rest into guilt, silence into discomfort, and stillness into something almost unbearable. This version of yourself thrives in noise, because noise gives it something to hold on to. It feeds on comparison, on validation, on constant activity. When you scroll endlessly, when you check for reactions, when you measure your progress against others, you are giving it exactly what it needs to survive. And for a moment, it may even feel satisfying, but the satisfaction never lasts, because it was never rooted in something real. It was only a temporary reassurance to a self that is always uncertain. You are tired not only because you do too much, but because you are trying to maintain an identity that was never meant to carry you. It is like holding a shape that does not fit you, yet refusing to let it go, because you believe it defines you. This effort is exhausting. It requires constant attention, constant adjustment, constant defense. And the more you invest in it, the more fragile it becomes, because it can never truly be secure. There is a quieter part of you that does not demand this performance. It does not ask you to prove your worth or compete for your place, but it is often overshadowed by the louder voice of this constructed self. The tragedy is not that this false identity exists, but that you mistake it for who you truly are. You begin to believe that without it, you would be nothing, when in fact, without it, you might finally experience peace. When you see this clearly, something begins to shift. You start to recognize the difference between what is natural in you and what has been built out of fear. You notice when you are acting out of a need to be seen rather than a desire to simply be. And in those moments, you are given a quiet choice. Not to fight this false self, not to destroy it, but to stop feeding it so much of your attention. It does not disappear all at once. It softens slowly as you withdraw your constant need to satisfy it. And in that softening, you begin to feel something unfamiliar but deeply steady, a sense that you do not have to become anything more than what you already are in this moment, that you are not a performance to be perfected, but a presence to be lived. You may believe that silence is something you must go out and find, that it lives in distant places, far from the movement and demands of your daily life. You imagine it as a quiet room, an empty landscape, a moment where nothing interrupts you. And yet, even when such moments appear, you often discover that the quiet you hoped for does not arrive with them. The environment softens, but something within you continues to speak, to react, to fill the space you thought would finally bring relief. This is because silence is not simply the absence of sound. It is the absence of inner resistance. It is not created by removing the world, but by changing your relationship to it. You can be surrounded by noise and remain undisturbed, just as you can sit in complete stillness and feel overwhelmed. The difference lies not in what is happening around you, but in how deeply you are entangled with it. There is a habit in the mind to argue with reality. It quietly insists that things should be different, that this moment should be easier, that people should behave in ways that suit your expectations, that your life should unfold according to a plan you can control. When reality does not meet these expectations, the mind begins its work. It resists, it complains, it replays, it anticipates, and in doing so, it creates a kind of noise that no external silence can erase. You might notice this in small, ordinary moments. A delay, a mistake, an inconvenience. These are simple events, and yet your reaction to them expands far beyond what they are. The mind turns them into something personal, something meaningful, something that must be fixed or understood immediately. This constant engagement keeps you from resting in what is actually happening. Instead of experiencing the moment, you are caught in your interpretation of it. Silence begins in a different place. It begins when you allow a moment to be exactly as it is, without immediately trying to change it, explain it, or escape it. This does not mean you become passive or indifferent. It means you no longer add unnecessary struggle to what is already present. You stop turning every experience into a problem that needs to be solved in your mind. There is a quiet strength in this kind of acceptance. It does not announce itself, and it does not depend on perfect conditions. It grows slowly as you begin to notice how often you resist the flow of life and gently choose not to follow that impulse every time. You start to see that much of your exhaustion has come from this constant inner friction, this subtle refusal to let things be. When that friction softens, even slightly, something else becomes possible. You begin to feel a space within you that is not crowded by reactions. Sounds may still reach you, responsibilities may still exist, but they no longer dominate your inner state in the same way. You are not as easily pulled into every disturbance, because you are no longer meeting each moment with opposition. In this way, silence is not something you achieve once and keep forever. It is something you return to again and again by loosening your grip on how things must be. It is found in the simple act of allowing, of observing, without immediately interfering. And as this becomes more natural, you may begin to realize that silence was never truly absent. It was only hidden beneath the constant effort to control what was never fully yours to control. To be present sounds simple, almost too simple to matter. Yet it is one of the most difficult things you can ask of yourself because it removes the very distractions you have learned to depend on. When you are no longer reaching for something, no screen, no task, no noise to fill the space, you are left with what is actually here. And what is here is not always comfortable. There is a reason you keep yourself occupied. It is not only habit, but a quiet avoidance. When everything slows down, you begin to notice what you have been carrying. Thoughts you postponed return without invitation. Feelings you set aside begin to surface. Questions you did not want to face become harder to ignore. In the absence of distraction, you meet yourself more directly, and this encounter can feel unfamiliar, even unsettling. You may discover a restlessness that has no clear cause, a sense of emptiness that cannot be quickly filled, or a tension that has been quietly building beneath your daily routine. These are not new problems. They have been present all along, but hidden beneath constant movement. When you finally become still, they step forward, not to overwhelm you, but to be seen. This is why presence requires courage. It is not the courage of action, but the courage of honesty. To remain with a moment as it is without turning away, without immediately trying to fix or escape it, asks something deeper of you. It asks you to trust that what you feel, however uncomfortable, is not something you must run from. It asks you to stay long enough to understand it, rather than rushing to silence it. There is a temptation, even in the search for peace, to treat presence as another task to accomplish. You may try to do it right, to force yourself into calmness, to push away anything that disturbs you. But this only creates another layer of effort, another form of resistance. True presence is not something you manufacture. It is something you allow. It emerges when you stop interfering with your own experience so aggressively. As you begin to sit with yourself more openly, you may notice that the intensity of these inner experiences changes, not because you have controlled them, but because you are no longer fighting them. What once felt overwhelming begins to soften when it is given space. What once felt urgent loses some of its grip when it is no longer constantly avoided or suppressed. There is also a quiet discovery that happens here. Beneath the layers of thought and reaction, there is a steadiness that does not come and go as quickly as your emotions. It is not dramatic or loud, and it does not demand attention. But it is there, quietly present, even when everything else feels uncertain. You do not create this steadiness. You notice it when the noise begins to settle. To be present, then, is not to eliminate discomfort, but to change your relationship with it. It is to recognize that you can remain with your experience without being consumed by it, that you can feel without needing to immediately act, think without needing to follow every thought, exist without constantly redefining yourself. In this way, presence becomes less of a practice and more of a return to what is already here, beneath the distractions you have relied on. And as you return, even briefly, you begin to see that the peace you have been searching for was never in the next moment or the next solution, but quietly waiting in the one you kept trying to escape. There is a quiet misunderstanding that keeps you searching for peace in the wrong places. You believe that if you could just organize your life better, solve your problems faster, or become a more disciplined version of yourself, then peace would naturally follow. So you keep adjusting, improving, optimizing, always moving toward a future moment where everything will finally feel settled. But that moment keeps shifting, just out of reach, because the approach itself is built on the idea that something is always missing. What begins to change everything is not adding more effort, but questioning the way you are relating to your life in the first place. Instead of asking, how do I fix everything? You begin to ask, what am I adding to this moment that makes it heavier than it is? This shift is subtle, but it moves you away from constant struggle and into a kind of awareness that is far more powerful than control. Much of your tension comes from the need to control what cannot be fully controlled. You try to manage outcomes, predict reactions, secure your place in situations that are always changing. When things go your way, there is temporary relief. When they don't, there is frustration or anxiety. You are constantly moving between these states because your sense of stability depends on something outside of you remaining consistent. Letting go of this does not mean you stop caring about your life or your responsibilities. It means you stop tying your inner state so tightly to how everything unfolds. You still act, you still make decisions, you still move forward, but you are no longer demanding that every result confirm your sense of worth or security. There is a difference between participating in life and trying to dominate it. Another part of this shift is releasing the need to become someone else before you allow yourself to feel at ease. You may carry an image of a better version of yourself, more successful, more confident, more put together, and believe that peace belongs to that version, not to who you are right now. So you postpone your sense of rest, telling yourself it will come later, after you have earned it. But this keeps you in a constant state of striving, where the present is never enough. When you begin to question this pattern, you see that your worth is not something that needs to be proven moment by moment. It is not dependent on how productive you were today or how well you performed in the eyes of others. The more you stop measuring yourself so relentlessly, the more space there is for something quieter to emerge. A sense of simply being here, without the need to justify it. This is where a simple practice becomes meaningful, not as a technique to perfect, but as a reminder to return. To pause, even briefly, in the middle of your day. To notice what is happening without immediately reacting. To allow a moment to exist without trying to reshape it. These small shifts interrupt the constant momentum of your thoughts and create space for a different experience to unfold. You may find that peace does not arrive as a dramatic transformation, but as a subtle easing, a moment where you are not resisting what is happening, a breath where you are not trying to become anything else, a space where you are simply present, without pressure. Over time, this changes how you move through the world, not because the world has become quieter, but because you are no longer meeting it with the same urgency to control, prove, and fix. And in that release, something unexpected happens. You begin to realize that peace was not something you had to build from the outside, but something that reveals itself when you stop standing in your own way. And so you begin to see your life with different eyes, not as something that must be conquered, fixed, or perfected before you are allowed to feel at ease, but as something that is already unfolding, moment by moment, whether you resist it or not. The noise of the world may not disappear. The demands, the uncertainties, the constant movement of life will continue. But what has quietly changed is your relationship to all of it. You are no longer chasing silence as if it lives somewhere far away. You are no longer trying to become a different person in order to deserve peace. Instead, you begin to recognize how much of your suffering was created in the space between what is and what you believed should be. And in seeing this, something loosens. The need to control every outcome softens. The pressure to constantly define yourself begins to fade. The inner noise, once so overwhelming, starts to lose its authority. There is a quiet freedom in this. Not the freedom of having everything go your way, but the freedom of no longer being bound to that expectation. You still care, you still act, you still move through the world, but with less resistance, less strain, less of that constant inner argument that once followed you everywhere. You begin to trust that you can meet life as it comes without needing to prepare for every possibility or defend yourself against every uncertainty. And in this trust, something deeper reveals itself. A kind of stillness that was never absent, only unnoticed. A presence that does not depend on perfect conditions. It does not announce itself loudly, and it does not demand your attention. But when you stop chasing, stop proving, stop resisting even for a moment, you can feel it there, steady and unchanged beneath everything else. This is the peace you are looking for. Not something added to your life, but something uncovered within it. The world may remain loud. People will continue to speak, to expect, to demand. Life will continue to move in ways you cannot fully predict or control. But you are no longer required to carry all of it inside you. And in the end, perhaps this is what matters most.